Hi everyone, welcome to Bright Future Dentists' personal statement workshop. We're very lucky to have an exclusive webinar with two dental students. One that have been continuously at our dent nets and helping out BFD, and one that has been also equally helping out and an alumni. So we're very excited to have both of them here. At this webinar, we're going to be learning about how to write an biographical sketch and how to stand out in your personal statement, writing strategies, and of course, we get to hear firsthand from our two dental students. So we're going to be going through 4 modules tonight. Module 1 is what is a personal statement. Module 2 is the top 5 tips from both dental students. Module 3 is FAQs about the personal statement. And module 4 is questions and answers. So we're going to have a Q&A at the end. You can also start by putting in questions in the chat box, and we'll be regulating that as well. Okay, so if you don't know what Bright Future Dentists is, Bright Future Dentists is a student-led pre-dental organization that is dedicated to help students on their pathway to dentistry. Through guest speakers, workshops, community service, field trips, and much more, we aim to equip students with knowledge and insight into the field of dentistry, thus creating a place for pre-dental students to form friendships and network with each other. Our team helps in developing leadership skills and our members to allow them to grow and become leaders in their community. So if you haven't done so already, we have a general members WhatsApp group chat that can help you with many application processes and general questions that you may have. Here is the QR code. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to join it if you haven't already. But if you are not able to scan the QR code right now, you can also go into our link tree linked in our bio on our Instagram.
Okay, that should be enough time. Yeah. Okay. And as we said before, just drop your questions in the chat box and we'll get back to you guys.
Okay, so we're going to start off by introducing our two amazing dental students here. So we have Sarah and Rachel. Sarah's from Dalhousie University, and Rachel's from Western University under the Schulich Medicine and Dentistry program. Sarah is a BFD alumni.
I was on the first team that we had at BFD, which feels really nice to be here now.
So just a disclaimer, Sarah and Rachel are not associated with admissions, and this is their advice based on their experience with their application processes. These are in no way official with the Admissions Association. So to start off, Sarah and Rachel, what are your top 5 tips when it comes to personal statements?
Maybe Rachel can start on this and I'll share mine later.
Perfect. So hi everyone, like Momo mentioned, my name is Rachel and I'm currently in my 3rd year of dental school at Western University, so the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. I was, like all of you guys in this place, working on applications while simultaneously balancing undergrad, or if some of you are taking a gap year, balancing extracurriculars or jobs. So I totally understand the stress and how like this is your big moment to put it all out there. You already wrote your DAT, you already did your Casper test or any other supplemental like tests. You worked hard on your GPA, and your personal statement is really a time where you can show all the other qualities about yourself that aren't just, a number on a paper, your GPA value or your score. So I have 5 tips, general tips that might be able to help guide you or just help you a little bit on your journey through navigating something as important as your personal statement or autobiographical sketch. So my tip number one for anyone who's starting to write their personal statement and not sure where to begin, it's to do some research on yourself. So when you're going to sit down and start working on your applications, my number one tip is just research yourself. So print out your resume, even scroll through your camera roll so you can remind yourself of all the incredible experiences that you've had that have led you to dentistry. And that should hopefully give you a little bit of that confidence boost and be like, yeah, I can do this. And then from there, you can start diving a little bit deeper. But that's a really nice place to start. And hopefully it makes things like starting your essays a little bit less overwhelming. My next tip is if you don't have previous experience in dentistry, don't worry. It's okay if your exposure to dentistry is minimal. What's really beautiful about the field of dentistry is so many of the skills that you need to thrive in the field are transferable. So any experience you've had, whether it's volunteering, academics, a part-time job, research, all those roles have helped you to develop skills that will be directly applicable to dentistry. So it's just your job to put that creative spin on it. So if you worked in a role where you gained leadership skills, you need to be a leader as a dentist. So you can kind of show how the skills that you've already gained can actually help you thrive either as a dental student or a future dentist. Tip number 3 is to directly answer the prompt. So some schools make it a little bit easier for you, and some make it a little bit more vague. So some schools will give you an essay prompt that's vague, like why dentistry? And that's great because you get some creative freedom. So if that's the case, no worries, like take your range, write about whatever feels right to you. On the other hand, if there's an application and some schools explicitly ask you to list something, so let's say they ask you to list 3 volunteer experiences, don't try to sneak in 4. If they ask you to write about what makes you a great candidate for the program, write about what makes you a great candidate. That means if you are applying to multiple schools, your classic why dentistry essay, it might not be a one size fits all. So be sure to always tailor your essays to each unique application and individual school, because each individual school is looking for maybe a different type of candidate. So just make sure you read those questions and the prompts and answer them directly. Tip number 4 is quality over quantity. So I know you guys, I'm sure you have a long list of experiences, but it's impossible to fit every volunteer, work, research, or shadow experiences you've ever had. So take some time to reflect and pick a few that you can really dive deep into. And if you're able to, try to pick experiences where you've gained different skill sets. A lot of different roles, you might have had the opportunity to work on a team, but maybe in one time you can talk about teamwork, but in another role, you might be able to pull out something like a time where you had to problem solve. Instead of listing like 10 experiences you've had, but maybe only getting to include a sentence about them and what you've accomplished in the role, choose a few that feel really near and dear to your heart that you can kind of expand upon. And that leads me to my last tip, which is show, don't tell. So show, don't tell when writing your essays. It's so important for you to give specific examples of your experiences, the skills you gained, the lessons you learned, rather than simply stating buzzwords or certain qualities you think are important for dentistry. So an example would be, instead of saying, in my role as a researcher, I showed teamwork and leadership, you should actually take the time and use some of that word count to explain how you worked in a team of professors, lab techs, data analysts to carry out your research, and then specific key facts of how every member of the team might have contributed in their own unique way, and then how this could then apply to dentistry. Another example would be, let's say you were a receptionist. Instead of saying, as a receptionist, I was organized. Great. If you were organized, show exactly how you were. by saying things like you managed a busy office that ran 7 days a week, answering calls in a timely manner, while simultaneously greeting walk-ins, scheduling and coordinating appointments so that the dentist schedule was always full. Just always illustrate with a story how you showed those qualities. And by having those concrete examples, your essay will be much more impactful, believable, and it will allow admissions to really grasp what an incredible applicant you are. So those are my 5 general tips when kind of diving into writing your personal statement and working on your applications for dental school.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Now I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
I'll actually, to make it less repetitive, because I think Rachel had very, very good tips, I'm going to try to revisit these tips later. I'll try to frame it differently. I have some similar tips. Some of them are different. So maybe we'll go through the questions first, and then I'll come back to some of the tips.
Awesome. That sounds great. So let's head on over to the FAQs then.
Okay, let's get started, guys. So first question is, I'm not the best at writing, so how can I write an engaging and impactful personal statement?
Yeah, so I think, and I've been told this by my father about writing in general, not in regards to personal statements, that you can be a good writer if you're a good reader. I think something that really, really helped me in understanding where to start writing a personal statement, where to finish, how much to work on it. I think it was really helpful to read other people's personal statements. And by that, I don't mean you have to follow a template that they've written in. I don't mean that you have to use similar experiences to the person, to the other person's experiences, but rather get a grasp of how they frame their experiences. And I think the more you read of different people, different experiences, the more you'll have an understanding of how to frame your experiences in your own unique way. So that's something I highly recommend. I do think the more you read, the more exposure you get to other people's stories, the better you will be at writing your personal statement as well. In regards to an engaging and impactful personal statements, Rachel spoke a lot about this in her tips. I also really think all experiences matter. I do think a lot of personal statement writing goes back to how you're framing your experiences. I think regardless of if you've worked at a dental environment or not, those experiences are valuable. And as long as you can storytell, and by storytell, I don't mean you're making up things that don't exist, but rather you are framing your experience in a way that is direct, is concise, is clear, and yet is exciting. And I think I think maybe to summarize all of this is try to convey the excitement that you felt when you were doing that experiences, and it'll shine through. And I think that's, to me, in my opinion, that's what makes an engaging and impactful personal statement.
And what would you do if you don't perhaps have an exciting reason that you have that led you to pursuing dentistry?
Maybe I'll get started on this, and Rachel, add anything if you have, but I think all reasons are exciting. I think some reasons might be objectively more exciting, but again, it's the way you frame your story. If it was exciting to you, regardless of how simple that experience was or that reason was, it will be exciting to other people. So let's say you had a walk down a street and one day you had this realization that, oh, this is what I want to do. That walk down the street could be the most exciting experience. And if someone got exposed to a surgical procedure and that was the reason that was how they were introduced to dentistry, and that's the reason they want to pursue dentistry, that's just as exciting. So I think regardless of what reason you're in dental school in terms of excitement, you can definitely frame it in a way and convey it's been exciting and impactful enough for you to make that decision about your career. So I think it can be just as exciting for your audience to listen to.
And just jumping on that, I don't think you need to have that initial spark that, okay, dentistry is for me. It's more so about the journey that led you there. So maybe you weren't sure at first, but you did your research, you shadowed, you learned more, you listened to dental podcasts, you followed people online who are in dental school or dentists in your community. So it's more so about what kept leading you down that path of dentistry, more so than what was that first thing that led you down there. So it's okay if it was a snowball rather than one isolated, very exciting event where a dentist saved your life, or they fixed your teeth with braces, or you had an injury to the mouth. It doesn't need to be something out of this world. If it's important to you, then it will be important to the reader.
Great, great. I'll see some more questions then. So what are some common mistakes students make when writing their personal statements, and what can we do to maybe avoid doing this?
Yeah, so I think kind of referring back to my tip about show, don't tell. A lot of common mistakes that I see when I've helped some students with their applications is they really love to use these big buzzwords. And I totally understand something that we're used to when writing essays for school, when there's a rubric and criteria of things we kind of have to check off like a list. And it's great to include those buzzwords as long as you have a story to back it up. So in as opposed to avoiding it, I would say just in addition to including those words, tell the story behind those words. If you're passionate about dentistry, what makes you passionate about dentistry? If you are a hard worker, what makes you a hard worker? Did you balance school with a part-time job while also studying for the DAT? Did you spend your summers, working while also preparing for this? Like, just kind of instead of using words, put meaning behind them. So that's what I would avoid, saying words without the story behind them.
I'll add something to this, and this was a good reminder for me when I was writing my personal statement. I always reminded myself that I'm submitting a personal statement and I'm also submitting a resume, whether that's through a form of a portal or the actual resume itself. And I think it's important to understand the difference between the two. So just listing that I've done this and I've done that, yes, you preferably want to mention the things that you've done if it's been a part of your journey. As to if the question, let's say, is why dentistry, if it's had an impact on your decision, you want to share those experiences, but you don't want to just list it as in the format of a resume, because you are also submitting some form of a resume along the way. So just as Rachel said, I think in that personal statement, it's the story of why these experiences matter to you, rather than, oh, I have also done this volunteering position. I've taken on this volunteering position and I've done this and that, which again, you are mentioning in your resume. And again, I know different schools have different structures, but in my interaction with applications, most of the schools that I was applying for in some form or the other required a resume. So maybe distinguishing the two can help you bring that story out of the experiences.
Great. Let's move on. So do you have any tips to make your statement stand out, or anything to avoid?
I think the more, and I mentioned this earlier in regards to all experiences matter, but I think be genuine about your experiences, even if they seem unrelated. Write about them and talk about how they made you feel and how they made you impacted you in making a decision. This was a tip that I heard 2 years ago in one of our webinars by a dental student that's now a dentist. Michael Martico mentioned, or he sort of gave us the reminder that the person who's reviewing your application is going through a lot of other personal statements. And put yourself in their position. Which personal statement will they remember? And by that, I don't mean it has to be something extraordinary in terms of the experience, but coming out of a session of reviewing 200 personal statements, which one stands out to you, and write the one that will stand out to you if you were to be reading it. And I'll always remember this. And I think it's just so fair that we understand that the people who are reviewing our applications are people. They can get tired, they can get overwhelmed. So try to sort of avoid their overwhelm and avoid them being tired through a repetitive way of writing your personal statement. And I think in regards to things to avoid, I think we spoke about that more in mistakes, but maybe Rachel, if you have anything else to add to making your statement stand out.
Yeah, I think exactly like you said, if something's passionate, something is your passion, or if you're passionate about something, or if you've had an experience that was very meaningful to you, that passion will shine through in your writing. I'd really recommend that you don't write necessarily about what you think you need to write about, and more so focus on what experiences you genuinely enjoyed, what you've gained the most out of, and what has maybe inspired you towards dentistry, or things that you can kind of apply towards dentistry, if that's of course the question that was asked. But that enthusiasm will shine through. So just pick experiences that you're genuinely excited about, that you genuinely enjoyed, and that you think had an impact on you and changed you, maybe even for the better.
And I think that's exactly where your tip of doing research on yourself comes in, because I think we often forget the experiences that moved us a little, but reviewing them and reminding ourselves of that passion and where that passion kind of started from, and then reminding the person who's reading our personal statement is very important.
Great. Okay. And then should I focus more on writing about my work, volunteer, personal experiences, or academic achievements or stories?
Yeah, I think depending on what you identify as your strength, and what you think stands out as an applicant to yourself, you can put different emphasis or different weights on each of these sections. I do think that touching up on all can be useful, just because as an applicant, you are being sort of looked at in all these different aspects. So have you given back to your community? Have you worked? And again, if you haven't or have, that's not the concern, but rather you're being looked at through all these different lenses. And then also academic achievements. So whatever undergraduate journey that you've had, how have you performed in it academically? Which I think, again, it's not just about grades, but it says something about you, just the way that if you've given back to your community says things about you. I personally come from a weaker academic background standpoint. And I think that's relative, but from my own understanding of my application, I think my strengths lied in my work, my volunteer experiences, my personal experiences. So I started with those, but definitely touched upon my academic achievements and my failures, which I think is something to remember, that we all have different experiences, and that could also be included in your personal statement. Even if it's not the shiniest, brightest experience, it might be a part of your journey, and I'm sure it is for the majority of people. So speaking about that as well. But I think it just really depends on what you identify as your strengths and weaknesses.
A lot of times you might also get lucky. It depends. The school might specifically provide you sections where you only talk about academics, or you only talk about volunteer experiences, or you only talk about work experiences. And they'll actually, for example, at Schulich, they'll give you kind of prompts for each of those things. In the past, I know this year the application isn't opening until tomorrow, but classically, these were the things that were asked about. So just make sure you answer the question that they're asking, and remember that dental schools are looking at you, like Sarah said, from it's a holistic standpoint. So it's valuable to include tidbits from all of these areas of your life, because it just shows you as a well-rounded candidate.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so some of you might be wondering, like, how long is the personal statement? Like, what is it? For AdSAS specifically, it's 4,500 characters. And then for some other schools, like I know UFT's 2 pages, some other schools might be 1 page. It kind of depends. So just look at that school's portal or their website to see that specific information. And then how long does it take to typically write a personal statement?
I think this is very variable. I personally, I think I took my time writing my personal statement. I knew it was one of the opportunities that I got to introduce myself. And I really wanted to make sure I am introducing myself in the way that I'd like to introduce myself in. And one of the biggest things that helped me, I wasn't consistently working on my personal statement for a month and a half, but I put everything down a month and a half ahead of when I wanted to submit my personal statement. And then just as Rachel said, I went through my experiences. I actually did the whole camera roll thing, and it was really helpful because, as I said, I myself was reminded of, oh, that day when I got that little tingling feeling in my stomach, and then it made me think of something. So I reminded myself of those things in bits and pieces. I didn't just sit down and I told myself, oh, I have to write this personal statement in the next 5 hours. And throughout time, I modified it a lot. I did ask for help from a mentor, Dr. Freeman, and this was at a stage where I had already worked on my personal statement, and even then I had a lot of changes to it. So I would recommend giving yourself enough time to reflect on the things you're writing about. And again, the reason I say it's variable because different people have need different amounts of time to reflect on their experiences. I like to do it over a bit longer time, but I'm sure it can be done over a shorter time with the same quality, probably even better.
Okay. And should you mention like long-term goals in your statement?
I think for me, I did not mention I think I mentioned none of my long-term goals. I think the longest term goal was that I'm interested in in dentistry. And I think the reason is I was unsure, and I still am unsure of my long-term goals. I didn't know until third year of undergrad that I wanted to go to dental school. And to this day, when the conversation of, oh, do you know if you want to specialize comes up, I'm like, until 2 years ago, I didn't know I was going to be here and I wanted to be here. I like to give myself the sort of an open end to the opportunities that could come. So I actually didn't have and don't have many long-term goals. I do have them in terms of values and how I like to contribute to dentistry as a field, but not specifics of what the format of it looks like. So I think maybe Rachel, if you want to add, I think if I had them, maybe I would have mentioned a little bit of them. I didn't have any, so.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that this is a dental school application. So the main theme of every piece of writing you submit should be regarding dentistry. And that can be either as a dental student or a dentist. So talking about how you aim to thrive as a dental student and how the skills you've gained will equip you to get through and overcome the challenges that you know you'll anticipate as a dental student and then as a future dentist. So I think it's really valuable to every time you talk about an experience to couple that with a future vision for yourself as a dental student or a dentist. And I would unless it's something that's like really, really valuable to you and unique to you, I think let's stay on the track of this is a dental school application. So in terms of goals, to focus them within the realm of dentistry. And then they can find out all the other amazing goals you have, maybe in the interview. But for the essay, I would say stick to dentistry.
Great. Okay, let's move on. So how should a personal statement be organized? Any like general idea of a format or anything like that?
Yeah, so going back to my tip from the beginning about answering the prompt, if you're lucky enough that the school gives you explicit like point guidelines, follow those guidelines. If they give you some more creativity, like a very rough word count or even just a number, a page amount, then I would say in terms of format, to remember that, like Sarah said, the admissions committee, they're reading hundreds of applications. So you want to make your essay and personal statement easy to read. So one way that you could do this is telling it like kind of a story in chronological order of experiences you've had and checkpoints through your life that have maybe led you on the path towards dentistry. That's not a cookie cutter template of how you must write it, but you want to tell it in a way that is easy for the reader to kind of sift through it, memorable points. So definitely, if you're able to tell it chronologically, typically that's how readers enjoy stories, as opposed to jumping back and then forth and then back to another experience. And then you mentioned something at the beginning, and then you mentioned it in the middle again, and then part at the end. So if you're able to kind of keep it organized and finish each thought, and I think it's a good thing if you can maybe mention something at the end and then tie it to mention something at the beginning and tie it together at the end. But in terms of when you discuss an experience, discuss it in its fullest, kind of give your complete story, beginning, middle, end, and make it kind of structured in that way if they haven't given you guidelines.
I want to add, and this is not, as Rachel mentioned, like a cookie cutter template that you'd follow, but something that helped me organize that story. And a lot of the things that I'm mentioning today was everything that I learned from my mentor. But the first sentence that I used was dentistry was once the last thing I thought I would do. And I remember when I read through my personal statement a couple months later, I was like, wait, where are you going with this? And I had forgotten how I connected to the fact that I want to go to dental school. So starting with something that sort of catches attention, and again, you could also not. And then I personally gave some academic background and family background if it was relevant to my experience and to my decision in the first paragraph, what that sort of ignited in me, the values that it brought up in me. And then just as Rachel said at the end, I touched up on the same content pretty much in the last paragraph. But I wrapped up as and sort of concluded as for why all these experiences that I mentioned in paragraph 2, 3, and 4 brought me back to the same point that I started with. And that was everything I mentioned in the first paragraph. So, and again, not at all a cookie cutter template. You can format it the way you'd like to format it. But I think the most important thing that Rachel mentioned, which I think is really important, is clarity, or just making it easy for people to follow.
Great. So let's move on to the Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions, they can either unmute and ask or just ask in the chat.
I see that Sophia asked about changes made to this year's application. I know it opens later this year. I know the deadline. Unfortunately, I don't have details. There might have been a webinar offered to applicants regarding changes. Personally, I wasn't invited to it, so I don't know what changes. All I know is that it does open tomorrow. And I believe there's only maybe 2 weeks for submitting it, as opposed to in the past, maybe it was a month. So it's a little bit of a shorter time span, but I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. It's great when you have that time, but also when you have that time, it might lead you to making a bunch of edits and overthinking it. So I think it's not a bad idea to, dedicate some time to it. but then, put it out there as opposed to having months and months to rewrite, edit, scrap it, start again.
Looks like Elmira asked a question.
Hi, Sarah. You mentioned academics was not your strongest strength. So did you not mention them at all in your personal statement? What approach did you take? So one of the things in regards to my academic background was that I had progress in my years. My first year, and for anyone who's worrying about their C pluses and their lower grades, I had 3 C pluses in my first year, and then I had a bunch of other B pluses throughout the year. One thing that was visible to myself, and I knew about the effort that I was putting in to school, was that there was a progression in there. So I did touch up on the fact that in first year, I struggled academically. And then I continued to say that I learned from my experience, and then I made a change. When I mentioned that academics was not my strongest strengths, I did not necessarily put that out on my interview, but rather in regards to the weight that I put on other experiences, I talked more about my work experience, my volunteer experience, than I did about my academic achievements. I also think, and this, I'm not sure if there's a cutoff for all schools, GPA cutoff, but I think the reason I prefer to also speak about other experiences more is that I thought to myself, if I were reading this application, a lot of the applicants have good GPAs. And by good GPAs, this is it can be like a bigger spectrum of GPAs, but relatively good GPAs. And so what makes me different from other people doesn't necessarily lie on my academic performance. In fact, it might put me down a little relative to other people that I thought were applying in the same cycle as me. What does put me in a different position, in a good different position, were my other skills. And so I just pretty much, I think I barely in one sentence spoke about the progress, and that is it. That was pretty much all I did about my academic achievement. The rest were more academic background of what my major was and why.
I think Amrit and Sophia have very similar questions of who would be the best person to edit your personal statements.
Yeah, this is a great question. My advice for this would be to share it with people who you admire. So whether that's a mentor you have, someone that's a role model, like maybe there's a dentist you shadowed, or a teacher or professor who you've had the opportunity to chat with on a more closer level, or current dental students or dentists. So for example, I've helped a lot of pre-dental students with working on their personal statements, reading it, giving my take. So asking people who you look up to and respect and trust their opinion. It could be your best friend, it could be your mom, it could be your sister. I think that's like one perspective. And then also, if you're able to ask someone within the field of dentistry, whether that's a dental student, a dentist, just for their take. So if any of you guys after this meeting ends, you can always, I'm sure Sarah would also echo this, but you can reach out to me on Instagram. My account's at rachel.dentistry. If you have some more personal questions in terms of your essays, I'd be really happy to help you guys out.
I don't necessarily think I can add anything more, but what Rachel said about finding someone that you look up to, I think finding a mentor, whether this is a dentist, whether this is a lawyer, whether this is a friend that you look up to, I think is really, really important in the process of applying to dental school. And specifically finding a mentor that does what you want to do successfully. There's a lot of successful people out there, but if someone has an approach to their career, if someone has the kind of approach that you'd like to have to your career, I think that's the best person that can help you. And then getting other people's perspectives, because you also don't want to be getting stuck in a loop of people that think like you validating your work. You also want to get opinion from other people, which I think Rachel beautifully touched on.
Amazing. Mimi had a question. So she said, not related to personal statements, but can you guys talk about your volunteer and shadowing hours? Do you recommend having various shadowing volunteering with average hours, or is it recommended to have volunteering and shadowing hours with a lot of hours?
Personally, for Western, when applying, there was no required amount of shadowing hours. It wasn't a mandatory thing. Some schools in the US, it is a requirement. That being said, even if the school that you're applying to does not require shadowing, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Not even just so that you can talk about it on your personal statement, but to really confirm that this field is something that you're interested in. You learn so much already. Just if you've been a patient yourself and you've gone to the dentist, then that's one perspective. But actually having the opportunity to shadow and seeing a little bit behind the scenes of what goes on in a dental office is so valuable. And it might make the difference between you wanting to go down one path or the other. So yes, I recommend shadowing, not necessarily just so you can talk about it on your application, but just for your own benefit. And then Sarah, if you wanted to maybe talk about the volunteering aspect.
I just think I know when you're in a position that you have to write something or you have to fill up resumes, you think to yourself, well, I should put this experience down and that experience down. I think same thing goes for your interview. I think at the end of the day, how you feel about your experience, that's what's going to come through. So whatever experience you decide to have, whatever kind of volunteer work that you decide to do it for yourself. Do it because later you're going to be able to talk about it, not just that you're going to be able to talk about it, but you're going to be able to transfer through that experience how it made you feel. That being said, I don't think the kind of experience that you have is important in regards to the application. I do think for yourself, it is important that, for example, shadowing. I think shadowing is a great opportunity for you to even know if dentistry is the right fit for you. You might think that the idea of dentistry, like on paper, is the right fit for you, and then you go to a shadowing session and you think to yourself, "Oh, I don't want this to be my daily." Same goes for experiences. I have worked a lot. Ever since I was 16, I worked at a cashier. Might seem unrelated. I spoke about it in my application. Then I worked as a barista. Then I worked as a dental office receptionist. And then I worked at a fintech company. And even talking about the transition from a receptionist, a dental receptionist, how come when you were already working as a dental receptionist in the dental industry, you decided to go work in a different industry? If you think of it right away, you're like, oh, well, it's unrelated now. But to me, there was a very good and clear reason as for why I wanted to get out of the dental industry before applying to dental school. So I think whatever experience is volunteering that you're thinking of trying or starting, the idea of volunteering is to give back to your community in whatever way. And I think just keep that in mind as you're signing yourself up for these experiences. In regards to the hours and how much, I think as much as you're capable of, as much as you think they're going to teach you about yourself and about your career as a dentist. So I know that it's just like saying don't stress before writing a test. Yes, it's in the format of something that you have to present to other people, but just remind yourself there's a reason you're presenting these things. It's not because you have to. It's not because it's a requirement, but rather because it's your way of telling people about your journey.
Thank you for that. Shamim, our founder, said, can you discuss any other writing components in your dental school applications that they may have, such as ATSAS?
I believe Dalhousie does not have any other additional writing components. So on ATSAS, the only essay that, the only personal statement that you have to submit is why dentistry. I think Rachel can talk about more about the Western writing components that are different from other schools.
Yeah, and this one can also apply because Almira asked about what the Schulich application was like, even though this year might be different. So in the past, for Schulich/Western, you have something called an autobiographical sketch, which is kind of like, let's say like a glorified resume, where you have the opportunity to discuss each area of your life, from academics, volunteer experience, research experience, experience in dentistry. And in addition to that, and I think even a little section for hobbies, at least when I applied. And in addition to that, you had your personal statement. However, instead of being the classic why dentistry, it was very explicit prompts regarding discussing volunteer, all the things you talked about before, why those things that you've gained would make you a good candidate for the school. And along with that, on top of that, there would be some like essay prompts. So whether that be a question about current events, about dentistry, and I know it sounds like a lot, but they all have very limited character counts. So for example, the year that I applied, the personal statement character count was only 2,500 characters, which compared to, I believe it was a 2-page maximum for University of Toronto's Why Dentistry. It was very smaller. It's much smaller. Same thing with those supplemental essays. So if they had a prompt about, let's say my year, it was a question regarding your thoughts on the fluoridation of community water. That was only 1,000 characters. This year, it could be different, but if I had to guess, it will probably be a similar format. And I know every year has been a little bit different in terms of those supplemental essay prompts. Every year it's something different, and the character count might change. So just keep an eye on that.
Thank you so much. We have another question that's unrelated to personal statements, but I think it'll be helpful. Sophia said, did you wait till interview invites are out to practice for them, or did you prepare in advance?
I was so stressed at that time that I probably could not have prepared for them. I was just waiting for an interview invite, and I think most schools I had enough time to be able to prepare for the interview. I think mainly the first interview invite was like my main chunk of practice was for my first interview invite. That being said, the interview formats that I was given for the schools that I had applied to were quite similar. I know different schools have different approaches to their interviews, so you might have to get adjusted to different kinds of interviews. I did not prepare in advance. I did prepare in advance when I got the interview, but interview invite, but not earlier than that.
Most schools will give you roughly a month, if not a few weeks. And I think that's totally okay. If you feel like practicing, that's okay. But usually it's quite stressful leading up to that. So I think it's totally like having anywhere from within a month or just under that should be enough time.
Thank you. Mimi asked, how did you find a mentor and who was yours?
My mentor for the past year and a half has been Dr. Bruce Freeman. I can put his name out as well. I reached out to Dr. Freeman on Instagram to invite him to an event, and then I met him at the event, and then ever since we saw each other at different events. So I stayed in touch with him. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's important to find someone that you think understands you and you think you understand in order to learn from. I think there's multiple different approaches to who you can be as a dentist. So find someone that you feel like you can resonate with in whatever way, whether it's through the way they manage their practice, through their personality, it could be anything. And I think Bright Future Dentists, some of the events that we host in person, like the DentNet, that's a really, really great opportunity to meet either pre-dentals that are older than you, dental students that have successfully started dental school, and then dentists because all of these three different generations are present at these events. So, and even having a mentor in all these different stages, I think, is important. You can have a peer mentor, you can have a dental student mentor, and then a dentist mentor.
So there's some amazing points, and I absolutely agree. The other question is by Elmira, and she asked, "Hi Rachel, could you share what the Schulich applications was like? Of course, it may have been different this year, but how was it previously?"
I think I answered that one. I skipped it
Like a
because
very
kind of
okay.
Yeah, so I think we already answered that one. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, should you include your course experiences in your resume? And if so, how many is a good amount or how many is too much?
Did you want to go for it, Rachel? Or should I?
Are you talking about like courses in undergrad, like what courses you took?
Yeah, I think that's what they mean.
Yeah. I would say as opposed like the schools are all going to get a transcript with your GPA and all the courses you took. So you don't need to list off what courses you took unless it's valuable to your story. If there was one class or course or professor or lesson that especially resonated with you and kind of helped you down the path of dentistry, then I think it could be valuable. Otherwise, I would kind of ease away from maybe including like lists of where you're just listing out all the courses you took, unless there's something valuable behind it that you would like the reader to know about.
Awesome. Hannah said, Sarah, if you don't mind sharing, what made you explore a different field before applying to dentistry?
And I'll touch up on it, but I can definitely tell you more about it if you want. You can message me on Instagram. But I knew this was probably my last opportunity, and I don't mean last opportunity ever in my life, but before my career in dentistry starts or my education in dentistry starts, to explore other fields. I have always had FOMO of things in life, of all the different kinds of versions of myself that I could be if I explored other fields. And so I was looking for a job during my gap year. And a friend that worked in a fintech company just asked me, like, would you at all be interested? Like, I can refer you to the company. And I thought to myself, I know nothing about fintech. And I thought that's probably why I should take on that role, because I should probably know something about fintech in the world that we live in today. And I think FOMO was the main reason. But I can definitely tell you about how that impacted my experience as a dental student and my perspective towards to my career, to the career that I have ahead as well.
Thank you. Amrit asked, just to clarify, do Canadian dental schools give applicants an opportunity to discuss challenges that may have affected certain components such as academics?
Sorry, I'm just going to read the question again. Maybe Rachel, if you have anything.
In the meantime, I do think specifically in my experience when I applied to Schulich, there was an area where if you would like to, it was not a mandatory field to fill out, but they did give you an opportunity if there was anything you would like to comment on, any challenges, extenuating circumstances, health, from an entire realm, they did give you that chance to disclose it.
Dalhousie did not have that. I know in regards to American schools, some also provide you with that section, but it's not for all schools.
Thank you. Mimi asked, when did you guys start studying for the DAT or Casper? And when did you write it? And what do you think is the right time for you?
For the DAT, I would say it's a good idea to wait until after second year, depending on what your required courses are. But it will touch on a lot of topics that you'll learn in the classic like 200 level undergrad courses. So biology, organic chemistry, physiology, things like that, biochemistry. Those are all things that thankfully I had the opportunity to at least gain some background on during second year. That way, when I started studying for the DAT, it was like a little bit more so review, or I already had that foundation. So anytime second year or beyond, there's no perfect time to write the DAT. But do note that your DAT score is valid for 2 years. So if you plan on applying, just make sure that it kind of meets that 2-year guideline. And Casper, it's only 1 year. So let's say, for example, I took a gap year. I went through 2 application cycles. Luckily, my DAT score, it lasted me 2 application cycles because it was for 2 years. However, the Casper test, I had to write a different one the second year. So anytime within that kind of gauge.
Awesome. The next question is basically a repetition of the last, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. Do you guys mind sharing which schools you applied to and why you ended up choosing the one that you did?
I applied to a lot of schools. I applied to mostly American schools and then Western at Dalhousie only for Canadian schools. Again, I think I was being realistic with where my GPA standed, and I tried to pick schools that had a more holistic approach to their application process. So only Western and Dalhousie for Canadian schools, and then I think 15 American schools, which I can definitely, I think we have the list of the American schools that I applied to in our previous webinar posted on YouTube.
Yeah, not only did I choose Western, but Western was the only school that chose me. However, I'm so like looking back now, if I even had the opportunity to make the decision, I would 100% pick the school that I'm at, Western. It is such like a community here. We have a very small class size compared to the other school in Ontario. There's only 56 students who start, and then we have 20 internationally trained dentists who join us. So the class size is small, which makes us all really close. It kind of feels like we're a family. It allows us to, even outside of school time, you can do things and put it in the big group chat and invite everyone. The clinical experience that we get is really amazing. And because we're living in a city where everyone lives close by the school, it just helps create that community, as opposed to being at a commuter school. While there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, it's nice to be in a big city, but the fact that me and all my classmates live within a 10-minute drive of each other, it just means that we were able to really develop the social support that you kind of need in order to make it through in dental school and kind of thrive. So the social aspect, as well as the clinical experience that you get at Western, makes me really proud to be a student here.
That's amazing. I think this is going to be the last question we're taking tonight. So it's how best can we make the application more suited for a specific university? I guess they're saying, how can we tailor our application for that specific university?
Rachel, I know we have to leave, so maybe you get started and then.
Yeah, perfect. I appreciate it. Definitely going back to like that very first tip I had is to read the prompt. Different schools will have different prompts about what they're asking for, and take the opportunity to research. Not only, I know I talked about researching yourself, but research the school and see what their values are. See what a lot of schools make their stats public about the incoming class. So see their stats and see what's important to them. So yeah, definitely look up their values, try to emulate that. And if you see that they value more holistic candidates, kind of focus on all areas of yourself. If you see that they're quite GPA heavy, maybe you don't want to, your essay is not going to be a one size fits all. Tailor them to those schools. And if they have those values, sneak them in there and kind of mold your experiences through whatever values they have shared, on their public websites.
Thank you so much. Okay, so once again, everyone, if you have more questions for Sarah and Rachel, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer your questions and to give you the support that you need. They put their Instagrams here as well. I think that the last slide might have it. If not, it's in the chat. If you guys can just put it once more in the chat for everyone, and that'd be amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you have any more questions or concerns, please reach out to us. And once again, we'll see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep, their Instagrams are on the slides and also in the chat as well.